The first snowfall of winter came early that year, covering the quiet streets of Maple Grove neighborhood with a thick white blanket. Sarah Martinez woke up to find her 7-year-old daughter Emma already pressed against the bedroom window, her eyes wide with excitement. "Mom, Mom, look how much snow we got," Emma shouted, jumping up and down. "Can we build a snowman today, please?" Sarah smiled as she looked outside. The snow was perfect, not too wet, not too dry. It was the kind of snow that packed together, beautifully, perfect for building snowmen. She had been waiting for a day like this all winter. "Of course we can, sweetheart," Sarah said, ruffling Emma's messy hair. "But first, let's have some hot chocolate and get bundled up." After breakfast, Sarah and Emma put on their warmest clothes. Emma wore her favorite pink snow boots and the purple mittens her grandmother had knitted for her last Christmas. Sarah grabbed an old carrot from the kitchen and found some buttons in her sewing box. They were going to build the best snowman the neighborhood had ever seen. The mother and daughter spent the entire morning in their front yard, rolling snowballs and stacking them carefully. Emma giggled as she tried to lift the middle section, her small arms barely reaching around the snow. Other kids from the neighborhood stopped to watch and help. Mrs. Chen from next door brought out an old black hat she found in her closet. The Johnson family from across the street donated a red scarf that their teenage son had outgrown. "He's perfect," Emma declared when they finished. The snowman stood almost 5 feet tall, with the carrot nose pointing slightly upward and the button eyes giving him a friendly expression. The red scarf was wrapped around his neck and the black hat sat at just the right angle. Emma had even found some small rocks to make a smiling mouth. "He needs a name," Sarah said, stepping back to admire their work. "Frosty," Emma said without hesitation. "His name is Frosty, and he's going to watch over our house all winter." The snowman stood proudly in their front yard, about 10 feet from the sidewalk and well within their property line. Sarah had been careful about that. She knew some neighbors could be picky about where things were placed, even though this was just a harmless snowman on her own land. That evening, as Sarah tucked Emma into bed, her daughter was still talking about Frosty. "Do you think he'll still be there tomorrow, Mom?" "If it stays cold enough, he should be there for weeks," Sarah promised, kissing Emma's forehead goodnight. But the next morning brought an unwelcome surprise. Sarah was making coffee when she heard angry shouting from outside. She pulled back the kitchen curtain and saw Linda Patterson marching across the street toward her house. Linda was the self-appointed president of the Homeowners Association, a woman in her late 50s who seemed to spend most of her time finding things to complain about. Linda had moved to the neighborhood about 5 years ago and had immediately started trying to control everything. She sent nasty letters to people about their grass being too long, their Christmas lights being too bright, or their cars being parked in the wrong spots. Most neighbors just tried to avoid her, but Linda seemed to enjoy the power her HOA position gave her. Sarah opened her front door before Linda could knock. "Good morning, Linda. What can I help you with?" Linda's face was red with anger. She pointed a shaking finger at Frosty the snowman. "That thing needs to be removed immediately." "Excuse me?" Sarah blinked in confusion. "It's just a snowman." "It's a violation of HOA regulations," Linda shouted. Section 4.7 clearly states that no temporary structures can be erected without prior approval from the board. Sarah stared at Linda in disbelief. "It's a snowman, Linda. My daughter and I built it yesterday. It's on our own property." "I don't care where it is or who built it," Linda snapped. "It's against the rules. You have until noon to remove it or I'll be forced to take action." "What kind of action?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "Fines. Legal proceedings. If necessary. The HOA has the authority to enforce community standards, and I intend to use that authority." Emma appeared beside Sarah, still in her pajamas. She looked at Linda with wide, confused eyes. "Why is the lady yelling about Frosty?" Linda glared down at the little girl. "Because your mother doesn't follow the rules, young lady. That snowman is an eyesore and it needs to go." Sarah felt her anger rising. She put a protective arm around Emma's shoulders. "There's nothing wrong with our snowman, Linda. He's not hurting anyone." "The rules are the rules," Linda said coldly. "Noon. Don't make me come back here." She turned and marched back to her house, leaving Sarah and Emma standing in the doorway. Emma looked up at her mother with tears in her eyes. "Mom, why does she want to hurt Frosty? He's not doing anything bad." Sarah knelt down to Emma's level, trying to find the right words. "Some people just like to be mean, sweetheart, but don't worry about it. Frosty is going to stay right where he is." But Linda wasn't finished. At exactly noon, she returned with a shovel in her hand. Sarah watched from her window as Linda marched onto her property without permission and began attacking the snowman. She swung the shovel again and again, knocking off Frosty's head and then destroying his body. Emma saw it happening and started crying. "Mom, she's killing Frosty." Sarah ran outside, but it was too late. Linda had completely destroyed the snowman, scattering the snow across the lawn. The carrot nose lay broken in pieces and the red scarf was trampled in the muddy snow. "How dare you come onto my property?" Sarah shouted. Linda stood there holding the shovel, not looking sorry at all. "I gave you fair warning. Next time, maybe, you'll listen when I tell you to follow the rules." "I'm calling the police," Sarah said, pulling out her phone. "Go ahead," Linda laughed. "I'm the HOA president. I have every right to enforce community standards." Several neighbors had come out to see what was happening. Mrs. Chen looked horrified. The Johnsons were shaking their heads in disgust. Even old Mr. Thompson, who rarely spoke to anyone, was frowning at Linda's behavior. But Linda didn't seem to care what anyone thought. She walked back to her house, leaving Sarah and Emma staring at the destroyed snowman. That night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah sat at her kitchen table feeling angry and helpless. She had lived in this neighborhood for 3 years and had never had any problems until Linda moved in. She thought about all the other families Linda had harassed over the years. The young couple who had been fined for having the wrong color mailbox. The elderly man who had been threatened with legal action for having too many bird feeders in his yard. Sarah realized this wasn't really about the snowman at all. This was about Linda's need to control and intimidate people. She was a bully who used her HOA position to push people around, but Sarah wasn't going to be pushed around. She was going to build another snowman, and she was going to keep building them until Linda learned that she couldn't destroy other people's happiness just because she had a little bit of power. As she got ready for bed, Sarah made a promise to herself. Linda Patterson had picked the wrong family to mess with. The war over the snowman was just beginning, and Sarah intended to win it. The next Saturday morning brought fresh snow, and Emma was ready for round 2. She woke up early and shook her mother's shoulder gently. "Mom, it snowed again. Can we build another snowman? A bigger one this time?" Sarah looked out the window and saw the perfect white blanket covering their yard once more. She felt a spark of determination. Linda Patterson might have won the first battle, but the war was far from over. "You bet we can, sweetheart," Sarah said, getting out of bed. "Let's build the best snowman this neighborhood has ever seen." This time, Sarah was prepared. She had bought Emma a new set of colorful scarves and found an old top hat at the thrift store. She even picked up some extra decorations, plastic buttons, a corncob pipe, and some holly branches to make their snowman extra special. As they worked in the front yard, more neighbors stopped by to help. Mrs. Chen brought hot chocolate in a thermos. The Johnson kids rolled snowballs with Emma while their parents watched from the sidewalk. Even cranky old Mr. Thompson shuffled over and donated some coal pieces for the snowman's eyes. "We're making a statement," Mrs. Chen whispered to Sarah as they watched the children work together. "Linda can't just destroy things that bring joy to our community." The new snowman was magnificent. He stood 6 feet tall with perfectly round sections. Emma had named him Frosty Jr., and he looked even better than the first one. The top hat gave him a distinguished look, and the colorful scarf made him seem friendly and welcoming. But their happiness didn't last long. On Sunday afternoon, Sarah was doing laundry when she heard Emma screaming from the living room. "Mom! Mom! Come quick! The mean lady is back!" Sarah dropped the clothes basket and ran to the window. Linda was in their front yard again, but this time she wasn't alone. Her husband Rick was with her, and they both had garden tools, shovels, rakes, and what looked like a small sledgehammer. Sarah rushed outside just as Linda raised her shovel to attack Frosty Jr.'s head. "Stop right there," Sarah shouted. "Get off my property right now." Linda paused and turned around with an evil smile. "Oh, hello, Sarah. I see you didn't learn your lesson the first time." "You have no right to be on my land," Sarah said, her voice shaking with anger. "Actually, I do," Linda replied smugly. "As HOA president, I have the authority to remove any violations of community standards. This snowman is clearly in violation of our height restrictions." "Height restrictions? For a snowman?" Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. Rick Patterson stepped forward with his sledgehammer. He was a big man with mean eyes who rarely spoke to anyone in the neighborhood. "You heard my wife. Move aside or we'll have you arrested for interfering with official HOA business." Emma came running out of the house in her socks, crying, "Please don't hurt Frosty Jr., he's not doing anything wrong." Linda looked down at the little girl with cold eyes. "Maybe next time your mother will think twice before breaking the rules." What happened next was like watching a horror movie. Linda and Rick attacked the snowman with brutal efficiency. Rick used the sledgehammer to destroy the base while Linda hacked at the middle section with her shovel. They worked like they were tearing down a building, not destroying a child's innocent creation. Emma sobbed as she watched Frosty Jr. disappear piece by piece. Other neighbors came out of their houses, but nobody knew what to do. Linda kept shouting about HOA regulations and community standards, while Rick grunted with effort as he demolished the snowman. "This is insane," Mrs. Chen called out from her porch. "It's just a snowman." "Mind your own business, Helen," Linda snapped back. "Unless you want me to start looking for violations at your house too." Mrs. Chen quickly went back inside and closed her door. Within 10 minutes, Frosty Jr. was completely destroyed. Linda and Rick stood in the middle of the scattered snow, breathing heavily from their work. Linda's face was red and sweaty, but she looked satisfied. "There," she said, brushing snow off her coat. "Problem solved. Next time, maybe you'll get proper approval before putting up unauthorized structures." Sarah was so angry she could barely speak. "You're completely out of line, Linda. This is harassment." "This is community leadership," Linda replied. "Some people need to learn the hard way that rules exist for a reason." After they left, Sarah knelt down and hugged Emma, who was still crying. The neighbors slowly came out again, offering sympathy and support. "This is getting out of hand," Mr. Johnson said, shaking his head. "Someone needs to stop that woman. She's been doing stuff like this for years," added Mrs. Patterson from down the street. "Remember when she made the Williams family remove their swing set because it was too colorful? Or when she tried to fine the Garcias for having a vegetable garden in their backyard?" Mrs. Chen added quietly. Sarah listened to all the stories and realized that Linda had been terrorizing the neighborhood for much longer than she had known. Every family had their own horror story about Linda's abuse of power. That evening, Sarah decided to do some research. She looked up the actual HOA rules and regulations online. After reading through the entire document twice, she couldn't find anything about snowman height restrictions or temporary structures. In fact, the rules were pretty basic. Keep your grass cut, don't paint your house weird colors, and don't leave trash in your yard. There was nothing about snowmen at all. Sarah called the HOA management company the next morning. The woman on the phone seemed confused when Sarah asked about snowman regulations. "Snowmen? Ma'am, I don't think we have any rules about snowmen. They're just snowmen. They melt anyway. So if someone wanted to build a snowman in their front yard, that would be okay. As long as it's on their own property, I don't see why." "Not. Is someone telling you that you can't build a snowman?" Sarah explained the situation and the woman promised to look into it. But Sarah had a feeling that calling the management company wouldn't stop Linda. The woman was clearly making up rules as she went along, using her position to bully people who wouldn't fight back. But Sarah was going to fight back. The next weekend, she and Emma built their third snowman. This time, Sarah set up a camera in the front window, pointed directly at the snowman. She wanted evidence of what Linda was doing. She didn't have to wait long. Linda showed up on Tuesday morning with a baseball bat. Sarah watched from her window, as Linda looked around to make sure nobody was watching, then attacked the snowman like she was trying to hit a home run. The footage was perfect. It clearly showed Linda trespassing on Sarah's property and destroying private property with a weapon. Sarah had her evidence. But when she tried to show the video to other neighbors, many of them were too scared to get involved. Linda had made it clear that anyone who opposed her would become her next target. "I'm sorry, Sarah," Mrs. Chen said quietly, "but I can't afford to have her come after my family. She's already threatened to report us for having too many cars in our driveway." Sarah understood their fear, but she was getting tired of being the only one willing to stand up to Linda. The woman was getting more aggressive with each snowman she destroyed, and Sarah worried about what she might do next. That worry turned into reality the following week when Sarah and Emma built their fourth snowman. This time, Linda didn't just destroy it. She poured rock salt all over their front lawn, killing the grass and creating ugly brown patches that would last until spring. Emma cried when she saw the dead grass the next morning. "Mom, why did she hurt our yard too? We didn't do anything wrong." Looking at her daughter's confused and hurt face, Sarah realized that being nice and reasonable wasn't working. Linda had declared war on their family, and it was time to fight back with everything she had. The fifth snowman would be different. Sarah was going to be ready for Linda this time, and she was going to make sure the woman regretted ever messing with their family. Sarah stared at the dead patches of grass in her front yard, her anger burning hotter than ever. Emma had asked her 3 times that morning why their lawn looked sick, and each time it broke Sarah's heart a little more. Linda Patterson had crossed a line, and Sarah was done playing defense. That night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah sat at her kitchen table with her laptop and a cup of coffee. She wasn't going to build another snowman just to watch Linda destroy it. Instead, she was going to find out exactly who Linda Patterson really was and what she had been doing to their neighborhood. Sarah started with the basics. She looked up Linda's address and found out that Linda and her husband Rick owned their house outright. No mortgage. That was strange for a couple in their 50s, especially since Rick worked as a handyman and Linda claimed to be a homemaker. How did they afford a $400,000 house with cash? Next, Sarah dug into the HOA records. As a homeowner, she had the right to see certain financial documents. What she found made her stomach drop. The HOA was supposed to have over $200,000 in reserve funds for emergency repairs and maintenance, but according to the latest report, there was only $15,000 left. Where had all that money gone? Sarah spent the next several nights going through HOA meeting minutes and financial records. She discovered that Linda had been approving expensive contracts without getting bids from multiple companies. The landscaping company that maintained the neighborhood common areas was owned by Rick Patterson, Linda's husband. They had been charging the HOA $8,000 per month for basic lawn care that should have cost maybe $2,000, but it got worse. Sarah found invoices for emergency repairs that had cost the HOA tens of thousands of dollars. New sidewalk repairs for $25,000, tree removal for $15,000, pool maintenance for $30,000, even though their neighborhood didn't have a pool. Sarah realized she was looking at a massive fraud scheme. Linda had been stealing money from the HOA for years, using her position as president to approve fake contracts and inflated bills. The money was going straight into her own pocket. The next morning, Sarah called Mrs. Chen and asked if they could meet privately. Mrs. Chen seemed nervous but agreed to come over for coffee. "Helen, I need to ask you something," Sarah said when they were sitting in her kitchen. "Have you noticed anything strange about Linda's spending or the HOA finances?" Mrs. Chen looked around nervously as if Linda might be listening. "I've wondered about some things, but I was afraid to ask questions." "What kind of things?" "Well, last year Linda said we needed to replace all the streetlights because they were safety hazards. The bill was $40,000, but when I drove around the neighborhood I couldn't see any new lights. They all looked exactly the same." Sarah showed Mrs. Chen some of the financial records she had found. Mrs. Chen's eyes grew wide as she read through the fake invoices and inflated bills. "This is stealing," Mrs. Chen whispered. "She's been stealing. From all of us." "I know. But I need more evidence before I can do anything about it." Mrs. Chen thought for a moment. "My husband, Tom, is an accountant. Maybe he could help you look at these numbers. That evening, Tom Chen came over to help Sarah analyze the HOA financial records. He was a quiet man who rarely spoke to neighbors, but he knew numbers better than anyone. "This is definitely fraud," he said after looking through the documents for an hour. "Look at this pattern. Every major expense was approved by Linda alone without board approval. That's not legal." Tom helped Sarah create a spreadsheet showing all the suspicious transactions. Over the past 5 years, Linda had stolen over $300,000 from the HOA through fake contracts, inflated bills, and outright theft. "But how do we prove it?" Sarah asked. "We need to find out who these companies really are," Tom said. "If Rick's company is doing $8,000 worth of work for $2,000, where's the rest of the money going?" Sarah decided to do some detective work. She drove around the neighborhood looking for any signs of the expensive work that Linda claimed had been done. The $25,000 sidewalk repairs were nowhere to be found. The $15,000 tree removal had never happened. All the old trees were still there. The $30,000 pool maintenance was for a pool that didn't exist. She also started following Linda's daily routine. Linda claimed to be a homemaker, but Sarah noticed that she left the house every morning at 9 a.m. and didn't return until 5 p.m. Where was she going? Sarah followed Linda one Tuesday morning and was shocked by what she discovered. Linda drove to a large office building downtown and went inside. The building directory showed that Linda Patterson owned a real estate company called Patterson Properties LLC. Sarah waited in the parking lot and watched Linda leave for lunch. She followed her to an expensive restaurant where Linda met with 3 other people in business suits. They talked for 2 hours and Linda picked up the check, a $200 lunch bill that she paid in cash. This didn't look like a homemaker who was struggling to make ends meet. Sarah spent the next week researching Patterson Properties LLC. She found out that Linda owned 7 rental properties around the city, plus 2 small office buildings. The company was making hundreds of thousands of dollars per year in rental income. But the really shocking discovery came when Sarah looked up building inspection records. 3 of Linda's rental properties had serious code violations, faulty wiring, broken heating systems, and structural problems. Tenants had been living in dangerous conditions while Linda collected rent and ignored repair requests. One building had been condemned by the city, but Linda had somehow gotten the condemnation reversed without fixing any of the problems. Sarah found emails between Linda and a city inspector that suggested Linda had been paying bribes to keep her properties open. Sarah also discovered that Linda had been using her HOA position to manipulate property values in their neighborhood. She would target certain houses with harassment and fake violations, causing the owners to sell at below market prices. Then, Linda would buy the properties through shell companies and flip them for huge profits. The Martinez family down the street had sold their house for $50,000 less than it was worth, after Linda had made their lives miserable with constant complaints and fines. Linda had bought the house through one of her companies and sold it 6 months later for a $75,000 profit. Sarah realized that Linda's war against their Snowman was just the tip of the iceberg. Linda Patterson was running a criminal enterprise that had been destroying their neighborhood for years. She had been stealing money, bribing officials, and manipulating the real estate market while hiding behind her role as HOA president. But Sarah had a problem. She had evidence of Linda's crimes, but she wasn't sure how to use it. Linda had connections with city officials and probably had lawyers who could make legal problems disappear. Sarah was just a single mother trying to protect her daughter's right to build snowmen. That's when Sarah remembered something her father had taught her when she was young. If you're going to fight a bully, you better make sure you win. Sarah wasn't just going to report Linda's crimes to the police. She was going to make sure that Linda's entire criminal empire came crashing down. She was going to hit Linda where it hurt most: her money, her reputation, and her freedom. But first, she needed allies. Sarah realized that she couldn't take down Linda alone. She needed other neighbors who had been hurt by Linda's schemes. She needed evidence that couldn't be ignored or buried, and she needed a plan that would destroy Linda's criminal enterprise once and for all. Sarah spent that night making a list of everyone in the neighborhood who had been targeted by Linda. The list was longer than she had expected. Almost every family had been harassed, fined, or driven away by Linda's abuse of power. It was time to bring them all together and fight back. Sarah knew she had to be careful about her next moves. Linda Patterson wasn't just a neighborhood bully. She was a criminal with connections and money. If Sarah made a mistake, Linda could make her life even more miserable than it already was. Sarah decided to start by quietly reaching out to other neighbors who had been hurt by Linda's schemes. She began with the Chen family, who were already helping her investigate the financial records. "Tom, Helen, I need to ask you both something important," Sarah said during one of their secret evening meetings. "Are you willing to help me take Linda down completely? Because once we start this, there's no going back." Tom and Helen looked at each other nervously. They had lived in the neighborhood for 15 years and had always tried to avoid conflict. "What exactly are you planning?" Helen asked. Sarah spread out all the evidence she had collected on her kitchen table: bank records, fake invoices, emails, photographs, and her detailed notes about Linda's criminal activities. "I'm going to report all of this to the FBI, the State Attorney General, and the IRS," Sarah said. "But I need more witnesses. I need other people who can testify about what Linda has done to them." Tom studied the financial documents again. "Sarah, this is serious stuff. If you're right about all this, Linda could go to prison for years." "Good," Sarah said firmly. "She's been destroying people's lives for years. It's time someone stopped her." Helen was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "The Williamson family moved away 2 years ago because of Linda. She made their lives so miserable with fake violations and harassment that they couldn't take it anymore. They lost money on their house because they had to sell quickly." "Do you have their contact information?" Sarah asked. "I think so, but Sarah, what if Linda finds out what we're doing? What if she comes after our families?" Sarah understood their fear. She was scared too. But she thought about Emma asking why the mean lady kept hurting their snowmen, and her anger gave her courage. "She's already coming after all of us," Sarah said. "The only way to stop her is to fight back." Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah carefully contacted other neighbors who had been targeted by Linda. She was amazed by how many people had stories to tell. The Martinez family had been forced to sell their house after Linda filed dozens of fake complaints against them. The city had investigated every complaint and found them all to be false, but the stress and legal fees had forced them to move. The young couple who lived on Oak Street had been fined $500 for having the wrong color mailbox, even though their mailbox was the same color as every other mailbox in the neighborhood. Old Mr. Peterson had been threatened with legal action for feeding birds in his backyard. Linda claimed it was a health hazard and attracted rodents, but Mr. Peterson had been feeding birds for 20 years without any problems. The list went on and on. Linda had systematically targeted anyone who questioned her authority, or who she simply didn't like. She used her HOA position like a weapon to destroy people's lives. But Sarah's most shocking discovery came when she contacted the Garcia family, who had moved away 6 months earlier. "Linda didn't just harass us," Mrs. Garcia told Sarah over the phone. "She tried to have our children taken away." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, her blood running cold. "She called Child Protective Services and claimed we were neglecting our kids. She said our house was unsafe and that our children were being abused. It was all lies. But we had to go through months of investigations and interviews. The stress was horrible. That's why we finally moved away." Sarah realized that Linda's revenge tactics were even more vicious than she had thought. The woman was willing to use government agencies to destroy families who opposed her. But Linda's biggest mistake was continuing to harass Sarah's family, while Sarah was building her case against her. Linda seemed to think that her intimidation tactics would make Sarah back down, but instead they provided Sarah with more evidence. Linda started filing fake complaints about Sarah's property with the city. She claimed that Sarah's fence was too high, that her garbage cans were in the wrong place, and that her driveway needed repairs. City inspectors came out 3 times and found no violations, but Linda kept filing new complaints. Then Linda escalated her harassment to a new level. She started following Emma to school. Sarah first noticed it on a Tuesday morning when she was dropping Emma off at elementary school. Linda's car was parked across the street from the school, and Linda was sitting inside watching the children arrive. "Mom, why is the mean lady here?" Emma asked, spotting Linda's car. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. I don't know, sweetheart. Just go straight to your classroom, okay? Sarah called the school principal immediately. Mr. Johnson, there's a woman who has been harassing my family, and now she's watching the school. I'm worried about my daughter's safety. The principal took Sarah's concern seriously and called the police. When the officers approached Linda's car, she claimed she was just monitoring the neighborhood for safety issues as part of her HOA duties. But Sarah knew better. Linda was trying to intimidate her by showing that she could get to Emma anywhere, even at school. That's when Sarah decided it was time to go on the offensive. Sarah had been documenting everything Linda did, and she now had evidence of stalking, harassment, fraud, bribery, and child endangerment. She had witnesses, financial records, and even photographs of Linda's criminal activities. But Sarah's secret weapon was something Linda didn't know about. Sarah's college roommate was now a federal prosecutor who specialized in white-collar crime. Sarah had kept in touch with Jessica over the years, and Jessica had always told her to call if she ever needed legal help. Jess, I need your help with something big, Sarah said when she called her old friend. What's going on, Sarah? Sarah spent an hour explaining Linda's criminal enterprise and all the evidence she had collected. Jessica listened carefully, asking detailed questions about the financial records and witness testimonies. Sarah, this is a major case, Jessica said when Sarah finished. If everything you're telling me is true, this woman has committed multiple federal crimes: mail fraud, wire fraud, tax evasion, racketeering, the works. Can you help me? I can't represent you directly because I work for the government, but I can tell you exactly how to file these complaints and make sure they get to the right people. And Sarah, this evidence you've collected is really good. Professional level. Investigation work. Jessica explained the process for filing complaints with the FBI, IRS, and State Attorney General. She also gave Sarah advice on how to protect herself and Emma while the investigations were ongoing. Linda's going to fight back hard when she realizes what's happening, Jessica warned. People like this don't go down quietly. Make sure you document everything she does from now on. Sarah spent the next week preparing her complaints and organizing all her evidence. She had over 200 pages of documents, dozens of witness statements, and a detailed timeline of Linda's criminal activities spanning 5 years. But just as Sarah was ready to file her complaints, Linda made her biggest mistake yet. Linda tried to have Sarah arrested. On a Friday evening, 2 police officers knocked on Sarah's door. They looked embarrassed as they explained why they were there. Ma'am, we have a complaint that you've been threatening and harassing a neighbor. We need to ask you some questions. Sarah invited the officers inside and showed them all the evidence she had collected about Linda's crimes. She explained about the destroyed snowmen, the fake HOA violations, the stalking at Emma's school, and the massive fraud scheme. The officers looked through Sarah's documentation with growing amazement. Ma'am, it looks like you're the victim here, not the perpetrator, one officer said. Have you filed complaints about this harassment? I'm filing federal complaints on Monday, Sarah said. This woman has been running a criminal enterprise for years. The officers left without arresting Sarah, and one of them quietly told her that Linda had a reputation with the police department for filing false complaints. That weekend, Sarah put the finishing touches on her federal complaints. She had enough evidence to destroy Linda's criminal empire completely. The FBI would investigate the fraud and racketeering charges. The IRS would go after Linda for tax evasion. The State Attorney General would pursue the bribery and corruption charges. Linda Patterson had declared war on the wrong family. Sarah was about to show her what real consequences looked like. Monday morning arrived with fresh snow, and for the first time in months, Sarah felt truly excited about it. Today was the day she would file her complaints against Linda Patterson. Today was the day Linda's criminal empire would begin to crumble. Sarah dropped Emma off at school and drove straight to the FBI field office downtown. She had 3 thick folders full of evidence, one for the FBI, one for the IRS, and one for the State Attorney General's office. The FBI agent who met with Sarah was a serious woman named Agent Rodriguez. She looked through Sarah's evidence with growing interest. Mrs. Martinez, this is very impressive investigative work. Agent Rodriguez said after reviewing the financial documents. How long did it take you to put all this together? About 6 weeks, Sarah replied. Once I started looking, the evidence was everywhere. She wasn't very careful about hiding her crimes. Agent Rodriguez explained that the FBI would need time to investigate, but based on the evidence Sarah had provided, they would definitely be opening a case. Mrs. Martinez, I want you to be very careful over the next few weeks. When people like this realize they're under investigation, they sometimes do desperate things. Sarah's next stop was the IRS office. The tax investigator was equally impressed with Sarah's documentation of Linda's hidden income and unreported business activities. She's been operating 7 rental properties and a real estate business while claiming to be a homemaker, Sarah explained. I estimate she's hidden over $500,000 in income over the past 5 years. The IRS agent promised a full audit of Linda's finances going back 7 years. Sarah's final stop was the State Attorney General's office, where she filed complaints about the bribery, corruption, and abuse of public trust. The prosecutor she met with was particularly interested in Linda's connections with city officials. We've been looking at corruption in the building inspection department for months, the prosecutor told Sarah. Your evidence might be the key to breaking open a much bigger case. By Tuesday afternoon, Linda's world started falling apart. The first sign of trouble came when city building inspectors showed up at 3 of Linda's rental properties simultaneously. They found serious safety violations that Linda had been hiding through bribery. 2 buildings were immediately condemned, forcing Linda to evacuate her tenants and lose thousands of dollars in rental income. Linda called the city in a rage, demanding to know why her properties were being targeted. But her contacts in the building department were no longer taking her calls. The corruption investigation had spooked them, and they were trying to distance themselves from Linda as quickly as possible. Wednesday brought more bad news for Linda. The IRS froze all of her business bank accounts pending their investigation. Linda couldn't access the money she had stolen from the HOA or the profits from her real estate business. Linda panicked and made her first major mistake. She tried to transfer money from her personal accounts to offshore banks in the Cayman Islands, but the FBI was already watching her financial activities, and the attempted money transfer only provided more evidence of her guilt. Thursday morning, Linda received a letter from the HOA management company informing her that she was being removed as president. The other board members had finally seen Sarah's evidence and voted unanimously to fire Linda and file a lawsuit to recover the stolen funds. But Linda's biggest shock came on Thursday afternoon when her husband Rick was arrested at a job site. The FBI had connected him to the fraudulent landscaping contracts, and he was charged with conspiracy and money laundering. Rick immediately agreed to cooperate with investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence. By Friday, Linda was completely isolated. Her criminal network was collapsing. Her bank accounts were frozen, and her own husband was talking to the FBI about her crimes. That's when Linda made her final, desperate mistake. Friday evening, Linda showed up at Sarah's house with a baseball bat. She was clearly unhinged, screaming about how Sarah had ruined everything and demanding that Sarah call off the investigations. "You destroyed my life," Linda shouted, waving the bat threateningly. "I'm going to make you pay." But Sarah was ready for this. She had installed security cameras all around her property, and she had the police on speed dial. Within minutes, 2 police cars arrived and arrested Linda for criminal threats and assault with a deadly weapon. As Linda was being handcuffed and put into the police car, she screamed at Sarah through the window, "This isn't over. I'll get you for this." But it was over. Linda just didn't know it yet. Over the weekend, more details of Linda's criminal empire came to light. The local newspaper picked up the story and ran a front-page article about the HOA president's web of corruption. The story included interviews with dozens of families who had been victimized by Linda's schemes. Monday brought the final blow. Federal agents raided Linda's house and business offices, seizing computers, financial records, and evidence of her criminal activities. Linda was arrested on federal charges of mail fraud, wire fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, and racketeering. The cure. Judge denied bail. ruling that Linda was a flight risk who had already attempted to move money offshore. Linda would remain in jail until her trial. The investigation also uncovered the full extent of Linda's corruption network. 3 city officials were arrested for taking bribes. The building inspector who had been helping Linda was fired and charged with criminal conspiracy. Even Linda's lawyer was investigated for helping her hide assets. The financial damage to Linda was devastating. The IRS seized her house, her rental properties, and all her business assets to pay back taxes and penalties. The HOA filed a civil lawsuit seeking millions in damages. Her tenants filed a class action lawsuit for housing her in dangerous conditions. Within 6 months, Linda Patterson went from being a wealthy real estate mogul to a federal prisoner, facing decades behind bars. But the best part for Sarah came that first weekend after Linda's arrest. Fresh snow had fallen and Emma was eager to build another snowman. "Mom, can we build the biggest snowman ever?" Emma asked excitedly. "You bet we can, sweetheart," Sarah replied. As they worked in their front yard, neighbors came over to help and congratulate Sarah on her courage. Mrs. Chen brought hot chocolate. The Johnson family contributed decorations. Even old Mr. Peterson shuffled over with some extra buttons. The snowman they built that day was magnificent, 8 feet tall with a bright red scarf and a cheerful smile. Emma named him Victory, and he stood proudly in their front yard for the rest of the winter. News crews came to the neighborhood to interview Sarah about how she had taken down a criminal enterprise that had been operating for years. Sarah became something of a local hero, but she always insisted that she was just a mother who wanted to protect her daughter's right to build snowmen. The final chapter of Linda's story came 8 months later, when she was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. She had stolen over $800,000 from the HOA and her tenants, evaded taxes on more than $1.2 million in income, and destroyed countless families' lives with her harassment and corruption. As Sarah watched the news coverage of Linda's sentencing, Emma ran up to her with an excited announcement. "Mom, it's snowing again. Can we build another snowman?" Sarah looked out the window at the falling snow and smiled. "Of course we can, sweetheart. We can build as many snowmen as we want." And they did. That winter, and every winter after, Sarah and Emma built beautiful snowmen in their front yard. The snowmen stood tall and proud, symbols of how one person's courage to fight back against a bully had saved an entire community. Linda Patterson's empire had fallen, justice had been served, and the snowmen were finally safe.